Hey everyone, happy Monday. There's sunshine today. So let's get busy on our calculations so you can get outside and enjoy. All right, so if you noticed, our calculation this week looks a little bit different. I want to talk about how we can use our inverse, right? Just as a fancy word for operation. So if I know that my problem is 24 divided by some number equals 8, I could use multiplication. Okay, so I rewrote this two different ways, right? So I can use my multiplication because if I know my facts, I can say 8 times what number equals 24. Or I could also use my fact family, which you see I made my triangle, right? This is my 24 is the top part, right? Because that's what I'm talking about. And I'm looking at my 8, and over here, I want to know what number goes here. So if I'm using my multiplications table, right, I'd be looking down my 8. I remember I like to use my column. So I'd be looking for my 8 and I see when I get to 24, how many groups is it? And that's the same thing that I'm doing here. And I know that that's going to be 3. So my final answer here should be 3. Let's take a look at the same thing. So on this one, and notice that this one we're trying to get to 9. So I'm doing 9 times what number equals 9. Well, if I have a 9 here, I really hope you've already realized that my answer should be 1. But let's write out our problem just to see. Here's the other way that I did it. I took my number that I had and I'm going to divide it. So I made 9 divided by 9 equals what? And I know that if I have 9 and I'm making groups of 9, I can make one group, which kind of is the same thing here. If I had 24 and I was making groups of 8, I would make 3 groups. Okay. Improper fraction. So we're coming back to this. And I was doing this on purpose, guys, because I felt like this is a skill that we still are having trouble with. And we have to be able to do this to be able to work with any kind of calculations with mixed numbers. So I'm just going to remind you that in order to do that, I'm going to have my denominator times the whole number plus my numerator, all of that over my denominator. You'll notice I abbreviated here. So when I'm doing this problem, I'm going to go 5, that's my denominator, times my whole number. So 5 times 8 plus 2, all of that over 5. Okay, so I wrote out my steps for you. Same thing I just said, right? And then when we do order of operations, I do what's in the parentheses first. And then I'm going to do my addition. And I did those steps, so I gave you 3 different steps to break it down, right? So I have 40 plus 2 over 5, which becomes 42 over 5. And this is the same as, listen to my words, 42 divided by 5. I'm looking for how many groups of 5 can I make in 42. Rewriting my problem, exactly what I said, looks a lot like this. So now I have to look, when I have my 4, I cannot make a group of 5. So I'm going to look here. And when I'm using my multiplication chart, I'm looking down my column for 5. And the closest multiple of 5 is going to be 40. And that's 8 groups. I just put a little reminder here for my steps. My divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. I'm taking my 42 and I'm dividing it into groups of 5. I have 8 groups. When I multiplied 5 times 8, I get 40. Then I'm going to subtract. So I start on the right. And 2 minus 0 gives me 2. So when I have my 2, this is my remainder, and it was being divided by 5. So this ends up being my fraction. So I have 8 wholes, and 2/5 is what that is. My improper fraction is going to be right here. I know I took it a step farther because I wanted you to see, right? This is kind of my answer right here. But that way you see where we went both ways. So this is my improper. Remember, for an improper, my numerator is always going to be larger than my denominator. So from now on, all you really have to do is follow this when we're doing number 3, but I wanted to show you both ways. Okay? So we're still going to do some practice with our decimals again. And so if you notice, we have 9 and 464 thousandths divided by 28 hundredths. Okay, so whenever we're talking, the first thing we need to do, remember, is look outside the bar, or this part that's after the division sign, and see, are there any decimals? There are 2 here, so we move it. So because we move this 2 places, we move it 2 places here and we bring it up. For me, I rewrite it because I feel like this is sloppy and it's easy for me to lose things. Okay, so when I rewrite it, it looks like this. That's a little easier for me to see. Now remember, we also want to make an estimate. So for my estimate, I'm going to pretend like this is 30, and I'm going to pretend like this is 900. Just for right now, I know I have more. But if this is 900, I wrote it over here. So if it's my estimate and it's a 900 divided by 30, notice I have a 0 here, so I have a 0 here. I know already if I do 3 times 3 gives me 9, and then I'm going to have another 0. So my estimate's going to be around 30. Now I know that it's going to be more than this because remember I rounded this down to 900, and over here I did round this part for the 30 up, but I know this is going to be more than 30, but it should be pretty close to this. I definitely can't have less than 30. Okay, so then let's talk about our division then, right? I'm going to always start on the left. So if I have 9 items, I cannot make a group of 28. So if I have 94 items, I can definitely make groups of 28. I'm going to use my idea how I rounded this one to 30, and I'm going to use the idea of 30 times 3 would give me 90. So I'm going to start there with my idea for my multiplication. I told you I make my problems off to the side. So I make my problems off to the side. And when I did 28 times 3, I did 3 times 8 gave me 24. So there's my 4. I carried my 2. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8. And I know if I have 84, that's going to be 10 away from 94. So I know I can't make any more groups. So here's my division part. I have my 3 groups, so I'll write that above, my 3. And when I did 28 times 3, there's my work. I end up with 84 here. And then I'm going to subtract. 4 minus 4 is 0. 9 minus 8 is 1. So I have 10 left. And as long as what I have left down here is less than this, I know I have the right amount. Now I'm going to bring this down, and I forgot to write my steps. Sorry. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. Remember, and we cycle right through that. So I'm on my bring down part. And now I have 106. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit tricky because I know that 3 groups of 28 give me 84. Well, let's think about this. 84, let's round it down to about 80. And 80, and we round this to 100, the difference is only about 20. So I have to be very careful when I think about this if I can make another group, right? Well, let's think on this. If I did 30, if I round this back to 30 and I make 4 groups of that, I'd be at 120. So I actually don't think I can make another group of 28. So I'm going to use the same thing. Instead of jumping ahead, I'm going to put another 3 here to make another 3 groups. And I'm going to put my 84 under here. So I did my multiplication. I did 28 times 3. I already know it's 84. That's from my work that's over here. And then I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 4. Remember, I always start on the right. 6 minus 4 is 2. I have 0, and I'm taking 8 away. If I have nothing, I can't take 8 away. So I go next door, and I borrow. That's my regroup. And I put my 1s there. 10 minus 8 is 2. Phew, good thing, because look at my 22 here is less than 28, so I did the right number of groups. It was 3. So I did my subtraction. Now I'm going to bring this down. So my 4 comes down. And this is where it gets this is really tricky because we have a bigger number here, but don't freak out. You got this. So if I look, and I'm going to use my idea of 30, right? And I know, okay, so I'm going to use my idea, and I want to know, well, how do I start? Because I don't want to do a whole bunch of multiplication. So if I'm going to take my idea and I say, well, okay, if this is, I'm going to pretend this is 30. I know that 30 times 5 is 150. So I know I'm going to have more than that. 30 times 6 3 times 6 is 180. Well, 3 times 6 is 18 plus a 0 because I'd be in the tens is 180. So I know I can fit more. 30 times 7 is 210. Well, it would seem like it'd be a little bit more, right? Because if I did 30 times 8, I'd have 240. So that seems like it'd be way too much. But remember, I only have 28. So I'm going to try going higher first. So I'm going to try 28 times 8. I'm going to try for my 8 groups here. Okay, so I made my problem over here, and I did 8 times 8 is 64. So I put my 4, I carried my 6. 8 times 2 is 16, and then I have to count up 6 more. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So I have 224, and that is exactly how much. So 8. So sometimes we will come really close, and other times not so much. So my final answer ends up being 33 and 8/10. How'd you do? Okay, so on this one, we have our 60 divided by 7. So I rewrote it like this. And if you're looking in your multiplication chart, we're going to look down the 7s because we're looking at 7 times what number equals 60. Well, I already know when I make my estimate that 7 times 10 is 70. So that won't work. So I know that it's going to be, but 70 is pretty close, right? That's 10 away. So I know this is probably going to be around 9. So I'm going to put that here, around 9. Okay. I didn't say that it's the same, but I know that when I make 10 groups of 7, I'm at 70 and that's 10 away. So I'm going to see if that's going to be enough. But I know that it's going to be pretty close to 10. Okay. So I'm going to take a look now and I'm going to do the same thing. So I have 6 items. I cannot make a group of 7. So now I have to go larger, right? So if I know that 7, if I use my chart, I know 7 times 9 is actually 63. So that's going to be too much. So I'm going to use 8. Okay. And if I use my multiplication chart, I can use my multiplication chart, or I could also, if I don't have a multiplication chart, start at one of the numbers that I know, and I know 7 times 7 is 49, then I would add on, or I can use a clock. 7 times 5, when my big hand's on my 5, I have 35, and then I can keep adding 7s on until I get to my 8 groups. So 7 times 8, though, is going to be 56. So we're going to put our 56 underneath it, and then I subtract. If I have 0, I cannot take 6 away. Don't you dare try to go up, right? We're always going down, top to bottom. And if I have 0, I can't take 6 away. That would be a negative number, right? So I have to go next door and I borrow, or we call that regroup. So this becomes a 5, and then I'm going to give 10 over here to the 1 column, right? So I have, this is 10. 10 minus 6 gives me 4. So I have 4 left over because 5 minus 5 is 0. 4 left over, which tells me I have the right number of groups because this number here is smaller than what I was dividing by. And so then I'm just going to take my remainder, and on this one, we're going to do this. So my remainder is just my 8, and then I have 4 left, and I was dividing by 7. So I have 8 and 4/7. Remember last week we talked a lot about how we could put our decimal and then bring that up and then just keep bringing zeros down. But we're going to stop on this one. And for this week, we're going to keep it as just rewriting my remainder as a fraction. Okay. I hope you did well. Let me know if you need extra help.